Hi everyone to the last and final panel. There is no coffee break, so everybody put your hands in the air for a second. Stretch it out, move it around, wake up, and stay awake, please, for a wonderful panel on the promise of open source investigations and what role can open source investigations and investigators play in justice and accountability efforts in Sudan. I know that the biggest single thing that has happened in Sudan is the switch from peacetime to wartime. It's the reason why we're meeting here and not perhaps in Khartoum. It's the reason why many of you are struggling with your own situations, your family situations, and it is an absolute catastrophe that has taken place and that has caught everybody looking for a response. Khalid Hair mentioned in her talk the third front of the war, which was the war on civicness, as she called it. It was the war against the journalists, the activists, the human rights defenders. Abdullahi Hassan in his presentation talked about zones that cannot be reached by human rights documenters, places where there is no connectivity, where information comes out only under most difficult circumstances. There was mentions about the targeting of journalists. There were mentions about the targeting of human rights defenders. One of the ladies here mentioned a rape of a human rights defender. Under such circumstances, documentation and investigations are extremely difficult, sometimes impossible. The reason why the word promise is in the title is because for open source investigators, generally speaking, the most important tool is this. It is not a camera and a microphone in an interview with a witness, with a victim. It is a laptop or a desktop computer where investigators remotely look at the publicly available information that emerges from conflicts, from protests, from places where there are horrendous abuses taking place. So here with me today, we have three open source investigators, three practitioners representing two organizations. We have, sitting on the far end, Michael Elsanadi, who's a researcher for 7 years with the Syrian Archive and who works at Mnemonic, which is the mother organization of the Syrian Archive. We have with us Inaam Eltayeb, who's a researcher at the Gisa group and someone who's been researching open source documenting for the last 4 years. And we have with us Mahasin Dahab, who is the project manager to the Sudanese Archive at Mnemonic, an experienced researcher and veteran civil society organizer as well. The two groups that we have represented here are Gisa, which was founded in 2011 and is focused on civic engagement, access to trusted information, and justice and accountability. Gisa focuses on digital rights, human rights, access to information, and transitional justice. And their work has resulted in films, in news reports, in campaigns, in events, in trainings, because of their strong networks in Sudan. We have Mnemonic as well, which was founded as Mnemonic in 2017, but it grew out of the Syrian Archive, which began in 2014. And the Syrian Archive began as an emergency response to an emergency situation in Syria, and it began with a collaboration between people in the technology space and people who are human rights defenders and reporters in Syria. I want to stress that it began with people who were roughly fitting the same profile as the people in this room. The Syrian archive focused on archiving the publicly available information that comes out of modern warfare. That is all the things that come out of mobile phones. That is the documentation that comes out that takes a digital form that is publicly available. They focus on storing the digital information and also, what is interesting, on reducing the impact of content moderation, meaning that if evidence gets posted to YouTube, YouTube will take it down. YouTube is not in the business of having murder videos on their platform. What the documenters here do is that they try to archive these things while they're still up, store them securely, make sure they are not tampered with, and leave them for investigations and for future accountability mechanisms, efforts, whatever form they may take. Of course, in the process of this, because it's sometimes tech-heavy work, they train human rights defenders, they help to develop open source tools, and, of course, they do investigations. Mnemonic has taken the lessons of Syria, and they have applied them to Yemen, to Ukraine, and of course, with the collaboration with Gisa, which began in 2019, to Sudan. And that is the Sudanese archive, which I hope Mahasin will tell us about in greater detail today. I wanted to give the floor to Michael to maybe give us a little bit more of a background on himself and on open source investigations. And this time we will sit together and we will discuss like this, so I don't feel like a school teacher. And I sit with my colleagues now. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you, Kris. Test, test, test. Okay, there we go. Hi, everyone. I'm Michael. Like Kris said, I've been working for Syrian Archive for about 7 years now. And I've been working on or conducting a methodology that people call open source investigations. So when I am talking to Philip, for example, or Radwan, or maybe a more traditional journalist, when they hear the word investigation, they think going to talk to people, going to see the site where an incident may have occurred. But when we talk about open source investigations, we're talking about conducting an investigation in a context or a conflict where access to that space physically is impossible. So that's where what Kris was talking about, the Syrian archive, comes into play, right? As we all remember, the Syrian conflict is still and was extremely deadly for journalists, both foreign and domestic, right? So what the founders of Syrian Archive had developed is a methodology to help fill in the gaps of information. And this methodology relies primarily on information available online. So what I mean by that is videos on Facebook, tweets, Facebook posts, stuff that you all are seeing every day. And through these posts, videos, photos, we try to answer questions of what, who, why, and how. And we try to include these, answer these questions using this online material. So specifically in the Syrian conflict, we have a ton of videos now, right? And I expect, and we do expect, as Mahasin will talk about, that with the Sudanese conflict, you'll also be experiencing a ton, millions of pieces of video, right, that we're archiving, right? And we're archiving it to make it available to you all as journalists, you all as activists, as lawyers, and so on. right? So you're probably asking like, well, what does this type of investigation entail? Well, I'm going to tell you to look forward to the presentation tomorrow, because I only have like 5 to 10 minutes. But really what it entails is confirming that the video shows the location that it claims to show, that it took place at the time that the video, or maybe the person who posted the video claims the time was taken at, right? And so you're probably thinking of, okay, what does this output look like, right? Once you have millions of different pieces of videos. So one example I'll give to you to look up if you'd like later on is at Syrian Archive we developed this thing called the Attacks Against Medical Facilities database. So we noticed in Syria that hospitals were being attacked both directly and indirectly, and we saw that as a theme in the conflict. So we collected and identified every video in our archive that potentially showed an attack on a medical facility, right? And through that, and through this verification process that I'll talk about tomorrow, we're able to document over 400 hospital attacks that occurred in Syria since 2011, right? But you have to understand, and we'll be talking about this as well, that this process is extremely tedious and long, right? You're watching each video for each hospital attack, and there could be 100 videos for one hospital attack, right? So again, to conclude and provide an introduction for my colleagues, an open source investigation is just a way to help you look into a conflict and to confirm what's going on, right? Of course, you'll still need, if you take it to court, right? Of course, you'll still need other corroborating information, as they call it. And OSINT can serve as one piece to that puzzle of an incident, whether that be a hospital attack, whether that be a raid on a person's home, and so on. Thank you.
Okay, hi everyone. My name is Inaam. I will be talking on behalf of Gisa. Okay, I'm an open source investigator. I have been doing this for like maybe the past 3 or 4 years, and so I will be talking about what Gisa did in this. Okay. So in Gista, we believe like the justice is like a long ongoing process, and we find out that this is something exciting, and we need to include like the as Michael mentioned the OSCE verification and stuff, and we believe like collaboration and technology is a very powerful tool, and should be included in our work. We now we're working on different projects, and we have like in the Human Rights Hub Academy, and we have the Sudan Human Rights Hub network, and I believe that a lot of you are part of our network in Gisa. And in the past like a couple of years, and we started to string this network to make the collaboration like good. So we developed like so many some monitoring tools to do that. So we are currently doing we are launching our WhatsApp chatbot. It's a tool that you can use on WhatsApp. You can basically send the video to a chatbot, or it's like a link. You share the video that we want to preserve or archive or just keep, and then you want to check basically. So it's like it's a chat, but the chatbot is something that you can just send the video, the audio, or the picture you have to, and then we're gonna validate the information that you send, and we're gonna verify it for you, and then we're gonna send it back. So this is like the chatbot that we are launching in the Sudan Human Rights Hub, but also we are providing like an e-learning curriculum, and this we have been also working and running workshops to build the capacity of the human rights ecosystem in Sudan. And we have worked with over like 40 organizations across Sudan, and we have created hundreds of hours of justice-related online training. And these trainings are accessible online and offline through our Wiki platform or Wikibox, if you are familiar with it. I assume like we worked with some of you on that as well. And we are currently adapting the academy to fit the new conflict context in Sudan. And we are working with exiled lawyers to build the legal cases on the war crimes as well. And we are launching an advocacy capacity building program soon so that we can develop like the network. In our like flagship reporting project for years, we led like the OSAN investigations and with our partners in Mnemonic. But we are now launching a collaborative platform to publish our independent investigations. Also, we're publishing reports from our Human Rights Hub network partners and media and legal reports with the support of our network as well. So, for example, we are ground truthing war crimes incidents with the Yale Humanitarian Center, and we are also helping with the C4AIDS and CIR to launch the Sudan Shahid conflict map, which the map is like something you can use. We did it with open source data. I can share with you later. So basically, the Shahid conflict map is something that we people just send us pictures, videos, and stuff, and it was like sent from different regions. And this map was particularly from the Darfur region. And we recently, have been hearing from people that there's a lot of atrocities happening. So we mapped it according to the date, city, and as well like we had whatever we were able to confirm. And so this is like one of the things that we do with the open source. And yes, and I think that's it, and I will pass it to Mahasin.
Thank you, Inaam. That was a very brief introduction. Yeah. Hello, everyone. I'm Mahasin Dahab, and I am currently the project lead of the Sudanese Archive. The Sudanese Archive briefly is a Sudanese-led effort to keep memory and aid all of the human rights activists, organizations, and journalists who are looking for open source information on Sudan since 2019, since the collaboration with Gisa began. The Sudanese Archive currently is the largest existing memory on all events related to Sudan since 2019. That includes the dismantle of the sit-in, the current war, the anti-coup protests, and lots of other information. I'll be happy to walk you through that, of course, tomorrow, again, in the workshop. What we are looking for right now is that we understand that Sudan, as we know it, no longer exists. We understand that there is a huge need for collaboration and recreating spaces for the Sudanese civil society and human rights organization. And we do see the Sudanese Archive and Mnemonic as this organization that can foster the growth of the human rights organization and develop tools and task force and coordinate efforts to actually produce pieces of information that can lead to accountability. Of course, again, we are happy to talk about that tomorrow and maybe answer everyone's questions.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you all. I wanted to ask two questions before I send it to the audience. And actually, the first question is a question for Mahasin. I wanted to stress the size of the collection that open source investigators do. And I wanted to ask Mahasin just to tell us how many pieces of information have been archived by the Sudanese archive since April 2015. And just to give everybody the sense of scale of the efforts of open source investigations.
Um, Thank you, Kris. I don't have a specific number right now, but we are reaching 500,000 pieces of information. The data collection processes are for us is different. So we have reliable sources. Those sources could be, journalists, human rights activists, and everyone who's posting a keyword on Sudan in specific dates. And then we do our verification. So this data collection process is automa- uh, automated. So it's automated, and some of it we do it manually. But we have a very large memory on Sudan.
And the second question I wanted to direct to all of you. And it's a question I think that's at the forefront of everyone's mind who ever gets on social media in any way. How do you work collecting information? How do you work archiving important information in situations where misinformation and disinformation is prevalent, propaganda is prevalent, and you have to do your work in this type of environment? All of you are experienced in this. I wanted to get your thoughts based on your experiences. Perhaps I'll give it to Michael, who has been in Syria for a long time.
So that's a very good question. In the Syrian conflict, you kind of have two pathways of mis and disinformation, right? And to clarify, misinformation is someone accidentally posting, misleading or wrong information. Disinformation is when someone willingly and intentionally posts that wrong information. So we have misinformation all the time in the Syrian conflict, right? A school is bombed, but some people on Twitter call it a hospital as they're resharing the post, and that's fine, right? Because as we're conducting open source investigations, right, we will know, we'll be able to verify whether that is a school or a hospital, right? What makes the Syrian conflict kind of unique in its disinformation is Russia as an actor, right? You have Russia actively posting what looks like an open source investigation or what looks like verified information, saying, no, for example, that satellite imagery is wrong. We have the right satellite imagery, right? We have more recent satellite imagery, and it shows that the hospital wasn't bombed, right? That type of mis and disinformation. But again, when we're conducting open source investigations, we're going to catch it, right? Because we go through this rigorous process of ensuring that that picture, that video shows what it claims to show.
Okay. Okay. So to me, according to my experience, the Sudan context is it's very rich with like disinformation. Yeah. So to me personally, like I come to lots of disinformation. So I developed like something. So in Gisa, when we in our investigation team, basically we have like sources. So we have a source list, people we can trust, and we have been taking content from them in the past like couple of years. So for example, I recognize Bashir or Bashi, he's a journalist, but I noticed that in his Twitter account, he has been like posting content from the protest, and people like, yes, and he sounded real basically. So so this is, I was like, okay. So but we reach out definitely when we think that this person might be someone we can rely on and we can take the content from, and that's it basically. So we just like we have a source list and then we just take the content from.
So we basically are expanding the work, Gisa left, and we do update these sources regularly. So we we don't mind actually running across this information, because Mnemonic and the Sudanese archive, again, we have a very specific research handbook that tells you from A to Z to produce an investigation. This is what you have to go through. Also, every investigation that is drafted is reviewed twice, once by another team of researchers in another archive, let's say the Syrian archive, because they have the biggest expertise. They go through every piece of information that is on that tag sheet for, that's going to be explained tomorrow, okay? But for every piece of information that created the investigation itself. They verify everything from A to Z. After that is done, we go into a meeting with the legal advisors of Mnemonic. We have that conversation again. And this time we are even asked about why are we phrasing the words the way we phrase them. Can this hold legally or no? And before this process was created, the Sudanese archive was notorious for not following every guideline. So if you meet our legal advisor, they will show you examples of what not to write. You would find the logo of the Sudanese archive and one of our published investigations. But hopefully, but things are, getting better for us now. But I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I would like to open the floor to questions from the audience. I will start with El Bashir because he was mentioned a moment ago, so we can give him the right of first rebuttal, and then we will collect a couple more questions and go on from there. Are you real, El Bashir?
I would like to confirm that I am real, and it's a pleasure to meet you guys. Hi, El Bashir Idris, big fan of yours. Honestly, I love your work, and I've been following it for a few years, and I'm glad a few of the contents have been used in the investigations so far. And as we go forward in the future, the rise of technology and such, and I'm sure you've guys had this discussion before in terms of AI and things moving forward. I don't want to move too much into it and such, but as you're doing your rigorous checks and moving forward, have you guys found a way of able to discerning if anything has been edited in a way or altered with for more dramatic effect or something? So essentially, my question is: are there ways to safeguard, the content or the things you're seeing online? Are you able to discern that's real, that's AI, or whatnot? Simple. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Bashir. Marine, I believe you had a question.
Yeah, just a simple question. A lot of, let me introduce myself first, sorry. Marine El Nil from Afia for Community and Psychological Wellness Services and Studies. My question is, because with what's happening in Sudan now, we're seeing a lot of people who are afraid to share things on public platforms. So are private platforms included in open source investigations, including text messaging apps like WhatsApp? I think most of the information we're getting about what's happening in the war is coming from WhatsApp messages and maybe private social media groups. So is that included? And another question is just that, are there any things that you have been sharing maybe with journalists about how you are able to make that discern between like real posts and maybe things that are coming from bots?
Okay, thank you very much. Philip, a question?
Yes, maybe two. And the second is only valid if the first one makes sense. First question, do you also receive statements from victims in whichever shape or form? I see nodding. Second question. If now one thinks about potentially passing that information on to a potential prosecuting authority, how do we get the victim's consent or not? Because that, to me, adds the layer of you guys having to not just store the information safely and check on its veracity as to the source, but also drill down to the individual and potentially ask their consent of their information being shared for these purposes. Thanks.
Thank you very much. It was okay. All right. We have one more question, and then we will let them answer, and then we'll do a second round of questions. So please go ahead.
Thank you, Mahasin, and all the panelists. Abdusalam Al-Haj from RIF Digital Lab, also consultant for digital media for AIN. I consider myself as archivist. I'm asking how, in this digital media era, how we can contribute to the Sudanese archive, because in your website is only information. And for example, myself, I have all the archive of Jiras Al-Hurriya newspaper from 2005 to 2011. I digitize it and have hard copy. So also, I want to ask, like, the accessibility of this information, like, is it available for certain people, researchers? Because also I know a lot of people who are interested in information, but if they don't know you, they can't have access for it.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So let's let the panelists answer, and then we will take another round of questions.
Yeah, I can answer the first three, and then I think Inaam and Mahasin are much better qualified to answer those other ones. So in regards to AI-generated, edited, generally content, so a lot of the videos that we see are already edited, right? They have like what a director would call jump cuts, right? So it just goes from one video to the other, to the other, to the other. Yeah, with added music. I have to say, like the like Islamist groups in northern Syria like to add the loudest music ever on top of their videos, which makes it impossible to hear anything that's going on. But that's normal, right, with editing like that. And we treat an edited video as multiple separate videos, right? So we go through that same verification process, right, for different frames or scenes that are in each video. In regards to AI-generated content, I think right now we're at a moment where we're watching so much of this content that I think I could discern it pretty easily. It's very obvious. But then again, like, it's a race against time, and I don't really have an answer for that. There's a great professor at the University of California, Berkeley, Hani Farid, and he's working on like combating generative AI in, you know, misleading people, falsifying events, and so on. In regards to closed sources, or what we call closed sources, so WhatsApp messages, texts, and so on, we don't really deal that much with that type of information. The farthest we'll go is entering, you know, extremely large Telegram groups or Facebook groups, right? Because to enter a closed, or to receive that type of information, especially when trying to observe potential perpetrators to a conflict, we would have to be misleading and, you know, essentially tell people that we're someone else, right? Which is beyond our ethics guidelines. Yeah, Mahasin said it does not hold in court. And lastly, for sharing with journalists, I know with both of us, and I can only speak for Syrian Archive, we do work very closely with both journalists who are on the ground still in Syria, as well as like Western media groups. So we've done stuff with Deutsche Welle, we've done stuff with Vice News, we've done stuff with the New York Times, right? So we're trying to balance, both audiences and both collecting content, as well as, making sure everyone who's interested can access those investigations that we do.
I'm just going to follow up because I think Inaam has a total different answer from what we're going to say. So yeah, we don't do closed source. We don't do private messaging. We don't do screenshots. If it does not exist for everyone, we're not touching it. And that's how, and I think that has a lot to do with Mnemonic being reviewed as an institution that confirms and provides facts. As for Abdus question, who can have access to the archive? Everyone can have access to the Sudanese archive. For us, it's the project is looking like the memory of the Sudanese people. We also accept requests for archiving. So the information you just shared, we can definitely make sure it is stored somewhere and you can have access to it and other people can do as well. People who do not know me would not know how to reach the Sudanese archive. That's not true. There is a website for the Sudanese archive. There are 2 emails for the public. So what we have now is that we are accepting requests for specific investigations on certain incidents that are happening in Sudan during the war now. That's requests at the Sudanese archive.org. And if you have any information or you're requesting a meeting with us or you want the Sudanese archive to join a meeting or anything, you send an email for info@thesudanesearchive.org and we'll definitely be there. Of course, after we verify who you are, why are you reaching out to us? Do we know you? But you'll definitely hear back from us.
Okay. Okay, so I will re-answer Marine's questions about the flow source. So, as I said, in Gisa, we were trying to develop something that matches the Sudanese context. And we realized that Sudanese people use WhatsApp a lot. And maybe, I think most of the people in the room share content by WhatsApp. So we developed, as I said, a chatbot that can be used through WhatsApp, that you can just send the video or the picture and it can automatically archive. And then I'm going to flip to Philip, and you said where we preserve our data. So basically we have an archive, or what we can call just like a server that the data can be there and it's secured and we can access it. I think this is one of the challenges because the servers is like what I think the server is limited no matter how you pay it to make it big, and we have data since 2003. So this is very difficult, but yeah, so we are trying to develop our stuff and we are trying to use technology to make things like match the Sudanese context. Okay, so for Abdessalam questions, so you said who can access the archive. So basically we cooperate with media organizations. So we had worked with the Channel 4 and a lot of BBC. So they request, hi guys, we are making an investigation about this thing and we want data from a specific day incident or this is happening. Can you guys support? So we verify what we have and then we share it with them. So we collaborate with media organizations as well. Did I miss anyone's question? So he answered. But okay, so yeah, people edit things all the time, and we noticed in the protest, and even in the war, you can see that the Jaish and the RSF and the South they play music, and sometimes they edit the videos. So there is some tools, there is verification tools that can be used that you can just make sure this video is reposted, reshared. Is it old? Is it edited? And how it's edited? Is it like, did you add a sound or there's something else? Is like someone did a Photoshop or manipulated the video or not? Okay, so consent. So one of our challenges. So I used to work in the Sudanese archive product and Mnemonic. This was one of my main challenges because we have sometimes the investigation. So there is no like enough data to confirm the incident. So I had to make a request to the legal part, like guys, I need to do an interview so that this investigation can be something strong. So we do conduct interviews, but it has to be in very specific questions, and the interview is very difficult, to be honest. But yes, we can do that, I think, with the open source, but it has to be taken in a certain way. So for the victim consent, in the past investigation that we produced over the last years, so there's some pictures and videos that shows some content that is graphic, and sometimes it's just like shows people faces. So we blur them for their like safety, and sometimes for like if they're so just to respect if the people is dead or not. So yeah, this is a way to preserve like the victim.
Great, thank you very much. I'm going to open up to another round of questions. I'll sneak my own question in first because I'm the moderator. All three of you have worked on very difficult topics for some time now, and the videos that you're talking about watching contain horrific images, horrific sounds, and terrible things. I'm sure everyone in the room who is Sudanese has seen their own fair share of absolutely horrific things, especially recently. I wanted to ask you, what steps do you take to take care of yourself, and how has this affected you? And I will let you think about it for a moment, but I will open the floor to more questions from other people as well. I have a question there.
Yeah, thank you. Maybe a question to Gisa and Sudanese archive. For the next steps and moving this from beyond just your investigation and being source for the information, are you doing some sort of outreach for maybe the next step of prosecution or maybe advocacy for the victim, such as maybe reaching to the possibly ICC or Amnesty International, especially for the ICC now that we know that there is this ongoing investigation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, please.
شكرا تاني لميامو لأنه يعني أنا استفدت كتير لأنه اتلاقيت مع مجموعات كبيرة اشتغلت معاها لكن ما حصل لقيتها وفي الحتة دي بشكر الإرشيف السوداني أنا اشتغلت معاهم شغل بتاع investigation من الفاشل فبس دايرة أوري التجربة بتاعت تجربتي مع الإرشيف السوداني إنه أنا لما بديت التحقيقات في حاجة كانت مميزة بالنسبة للناجين اللي أنا عملت معاهم التحقيق يعني كانوا حافظين الحادثة من قبل 15 سنة فهم بيكونوا حافظينها باليوم وبالدقيقة وبالساعة وبيحكوا يعني بكل ما عندهم وبعد ذاك بحس إنهم هم كانوا مرتاحين يعني الناجين ذاته بعد يحكوا بيكونوا مرتاحين على الحاجة اللي حكوها دي إنه يعني بعد ذاك كان بيعرفهم إنه ده حيكون وحيتبسى أو حنتعامل نحن مع المعلومات اللي نحن أخذناها منكم في جهات كثيرة جدا فأنا كنت شخصيا حريصة على إنه أخذ الموافقة من الناجية أو الناجي لما أقوم أعمل معاه التحقيق عشان أرسله للتاريخ الشفوي فكنت باخذ موافقتهم في البداية فكانوا مرتاحين جدا أنا سؤالي لهم إنه الأحداث الأخيرة اللي حصلت الوضع هسه صعب شديد في إنه يتعمل تحقيق فأنتوا بتعتمدوا على شنو في الوقت الحالي عشان تكون المعلومات فريش.
Cool, thank you very much. Another question here.
طيب أنا بحكم عملي أنا صحفي بحاول أربط الدور اللي إحنا بنقوم به مع أدوار اللي بتقوم به المؤسسات اللي بتمثلوها أنتوا الآن. كيف أنا أقدر أعتمد على مادة أو معلومات مثلا أخذها من الإرشيف السوداني أو أخذها من المؤسسات الثانية. أنا كيف أقدر أضمن مصداقيتها؟ ذكرتي في مؤسسة قسطة إنه متعاونين معاكم ناس BBC في إنه تأخذ منكم بعض الآن مستوى التشبيك بينكم والمؤسسات الإعلامية. يعني إحنا في دارفور 24 حتى الآن ما تعاوننا معاكم بشكل من الأشكال. هل نستطيع أن نتعاون معكم أو نثق في إنه المعلومات اللي أنتم بتطلعوها أو بتحصلوا عليها بالنسبة لنا حتكون موثوقة أن إحنا نقدر ننشرها في الويب سايت تبعنا؟ شكرا جزيلا.
Okay, thank you very much. Bashi, I will give you a short question, please.
Hi there. So it's not really a question. I want to give you your flowers, really. So I want to say thank you to you guys because for us human rights monitors, defenders, protesters, activists, and whenever we're out in the field and getting the content and putting it up there, sometimes it feels like we're screaming into a void. But it's really reassuring to know that the efforts aren't in vain. I've seen many of young people who, during the times of the 2021 coup in Sudan, they have unfortunately lost their lives. But they were the ones also videoing, documenting, and putting it up there. So if anything, thank you, and please keep up the good work because you make us feel like we're actually moving forward. So I appreciate it. Cheers.
Thank you very much for those thoughts. There's one more question and then we will go to the audience, to the panelists.
طيب شكرا. هو ما سؤال لكن أنا داير أمشي في نفس الكلام اللي كان بيتكلم فيه مع ديبو. إنه هسه حاليا في الوضع الراهن في السودان في مشكلة كبيرة في القصة بتاعت المعلومات والجمع حقها ويا مصدر ممكن يكون هو ممكن تقدر تثق فيه وغيره. نحن برضو في الفريمورك إننا مشروع اسمه داتا فور تشينج تقريبا له سنة. نحن لكن بنجمع 3 حاجات. بنجمع الأحداث السياسية اللي بتحصل في السودان، بنجمع تاني الأحداث الأمنية اللي بتحصل، والحاجة الثالثة بنجمع الأنشطة بتاعت المقاومة. فبرضو كيف إنه الناس ممكن يتعاونوا في القصة بتاعت جمع المعلومات عشان المعلومة لما تجي من أكتر من جهة ممكن يكون إنها مصداقية بعد ذاك ممكن تتشارك مع جهات مختلفة يعني. فممكن الناس اللي قدام تمشي في إنه كيف تتعاون في القصة بتاعت جمع المعلومات. شكرا.
Thank you very much. I'll let me give it up to the panelists to have an answer.
Okay. So we'll start with Hazm. Okay. So he was talking about the outreach. So I want to mention that in our past relationship with Mnemonic, we had a very good example that can be like it was something we did on the Sudan context. It was an Ubayyid case court. So technically it was an investigation and the RSF did a massacre on student in an Ubayyid city. And there were like data, CCTV, people posted stuff online, on Facebook, on Twitter and everything. And a group of lawyers from Al Ubayyid reached out, hey guys, we have this data and we don't know what to do. Can you guys help us? We verified the videos and the pictures and the incident and we were able to, there was a bank there and we took the CCTV, we did the verification and we have so there is something called a verification process and there is some verification tool. I think Mahasin can explain this in the workshop that we will be talking about. So we did the verification and for the first time in the history of Sudan, visual evidence was something that can be taken to court and the judge made the sentence to I think there were nine RSF soldiers where they were like the sentence was this, but regarding that, I think it was the first court in Sudan that used that. So I think this might work actually, and I think this is why Mahasin said in Mnemonic that we have to be very careful with the legal stuff, because you will never know the power of the thing that you are gathering, basically. So this something can be used, and we can reach out to. So for example, if this work on a regional court, I think it definitely can work on an international court. So I think there is a future with the open source in Sudan, and I noticed a lot of people like how we're gonna gather data, and I think this is the right time that people can start to gather data from open source, because no one can actually reach and go there. And there is a lot of things, by the way, and a lot of context, and we can't even, yes, we don't even have the capacity to monitor all of the stuff, basically. So I will go to the other question.
The mental health question was first.
Which one didn't write? Okay, so someone said كيف أنا أضمن مصداقيتهم. Okay, يا أستاذ. طيب, I will answer this one in Arabic. أنت قلت كيف تضمن المصداقية حق الحاجة. طيب, في حاجة اسمها التأكد والتحقق من أي حاجة. فلما نكون نقول لك مثلا عندنا دليل مرئي، الحي لما يبقى هو دليل معناها مشى بمرحلة أو بروسيس طويلة شديد، اللي هي عبارة عن قلنا الفيريفيكيشن أو التحقق والتأكد، بتجي في خطوات كثيرة. من الحاجة دي حصلت 200 وين الزمن بتاعها، إذا في حاجة ظاهرة منو عمل شنو لمنو، ففي حاجات كثيرة. فأنت لما تيجي تقول لنا يا إخواننا أنا دايركم تتحققوا أو تتأكدوا من الحاجة دي، إحنا أوكي نحن بنتحقق وبنتأكد من الدليل ده قبل ما نحن نديك له. فأنت مثلا لو if you have stuff أو عندك مثلا حاجات فيديوهات مثلا انتوا جمعتوها دايرين تتأكدوا منها، you can reach out definitely to the Sudanese archive ولا لنا it's fine يعني. فالفكرة انه الناس تقدر تتأكد من اللي هو من المحتوى. ففي طرق وفي آليات الناس تقدر تتحقق من المحتوى. طيب, آخر حاجة حأرجع للسؤال بتاع عواطف. انت قلتي احنا بنعتمد على شنو؟ زي ما قلنا الحاجة دي احنا هسه حاليا في الحاجة الحاصلة في السودان في الصراع، صعب شديد انه الناس اصلا تصل، وصعب شديد انك تقدر يعني ترسي الزول وكده. فلو لاحظت مثلا حافظ قبل مشى تشات حتى ما قدر يدخل جوا الجنينة ولا كده، استاذ عبد الله قبل نفس الشيء. فبقت انك تدخل اي منطقة بتاع الصراع حاجة صعبة شديد. فتو بي اونست نحن اصلا بنعتمد على اللي هو الاوبن سورس او المصادر المفتوحة، بالذات هسه بعد الحرب بقى التركيز حتى عليها اكتر. يعني احنا بنلقى في الاوبن سورس ده اي حاجه. فذاته مش انا قلت كنا زمان بنحتاج اننا ندعم الحاجه دي مثلا بتستموني ولا شهاده. هسي you can do حاجات كتير، تكتب تقرير كامل من غير ما تحتاج لزول. في دعامة قتلوا الناس ضربوهم ما عارف شنو. you can find يعني content. فنحن we rely on open source أو المصادر المفتوحة. تمام, شكرا, thank you everyone. أظن أنا جاوبت على كل الناس.
إلا كريس.
Chris. Okay. My mental health. Okay. I forgot. Okay.
Exactly.
So he mentioned that, yes, I swear I forgot. So I have been working in this open source since 2019 or 2020. So to me, this is not healthy, but I developed an immunity. So I can watch whatever. Nothing triggers me, nothing affects me. I watch videos. So this is what I do for a living. I think this is why I think I'm not sure. But yeah, I'm just in it in a very bad way. So to me, sometimes it's very difficult and triggering, especially after the war. The content was like very heavy. When you see something, okay, I saw a video. I was doing a monitoring, and I saw a video from my neighborhood, and people were stealing stuff, and there were arrests. I was like, okay, this is real. So sometimes you get triggered, but me personally, I just developed an immunity. But yes, the therapist. I go to a therapist, not regularly, but sometimes. Yes, I need assistance from time to time.
طيب, I'm gonna try and remember. How do you guarantee the information is accurate? How do you guarantee the information you are seeking from the Sudanese archive is accurate? What the Sudanese archive or Mnemonic does is basically we give access to people. We conduct a small training for individuals who are interested in data on Sudan. And we have specific roles. You know, if we give you the role of an analyst, you can do this, and you can't do that on our platform. What you get to see, what you get to find is that you would see content categorized by date, by hashtags, by months, and by keywords. So whichever date you're looking for, you're gonna find it, and then you're gonna see the content for yourself. You're going to do your own analysis on it, and you're going to be writing your pieces. That's for journalists and analysts and researchers on Sudan. About the outreach for ICC, Amnesty International, and other platforms, we are open again for collaboration. We are currently working on 2 investigations. One of them is on West Darfur. The other is on Khartoum, and specifically incidents that are related to Khartoum South. And our researchers, it's heavy content. It's a lot of data that are open source. But when those researchers are ready and they're ready to be published, they will definitely be emailed to everyone. And that's our form of outreach. What else? Oral history project. Okay. عن سؤال عواطف. I'm gonna start talking in Arabic. عن سؤال عواطف له علاقة ب لقاء الناديات والناجين. ده ما شغل الأرشيف السوداني حصة، لكن أنا وإنعام تلاقينا أصلا يعني في اعتصام القيادة، وبدينا كان مشروع الأول لنا في تاريخ التحقيقات بتاعت حقوق الإنسان، كان بيعتمد على المقابلة مع الناجيات من العنف الجنسي من فض اعتصام القيادة. دي كانت أظن لي دي الحاجة اللي برضو ساهمت في إنه إحنا عندنا مناعة شديدة من الأذى النفسي، يعني لأنه دي كان مرحلة صعبة. الحاجة الكويسة في الشغل ده بتاع إنه إحنا بقينا بنشتغل بمصادر مفتوحة، إنه هي كويسة ما كويسة، يعني إنه نحن قللنا الهيومن انتراكشن مع الناجيات عشان الموضوع ما يبقى شخص زيادة عن اللزوم أو مع المتعرضين للموضوع. ولقينا معلومات ممكن تكون جزء من تحقيق بيعمله زول تاني عنده قدرة ذهنية إنه يعمله بصورة شخصية. فأظن لي دي إجابتي لكي. نصيحتي للناس اللي عاوزين يشتغلوا في الموضوع ده بتاع المقابلات الشخصية مع الناجيات، حاولوا بقدر الإمكان إنه بجد تقروا الجايد لاينز بتاعت حماية الناجيات والناجين. حاولوا بقدر الإمكان برضو إنه ما تشخصنوا القضايا بصورة شخصية. بعض مرات ممكن نتقبل إن إحنا بشر وما ممكن نربح في كل الصراعات اللي ممكن نخوضها. About the mental health and the workload. So since April until now, the Sudanese archive has over 71,000 pieces of information on the war itself. That's a huge load of information. It's a constant struggle of wanting to do more work because this is needed, because this is the only existing memory of Sudan. And another struggle of thinking of family and loved ones that are stranded, or hearing of a friend giving birth in a bathtub in Khartoum, and it's really too complicated. But I think the small things do matter. You know, taking a shower, remembering to take a shower is very important. And self-care really does help a lot. And yeah, that's my approach to my mental health, at least.
Yeah, I think Mahasin and Inaam did a wonderful job answering every question, honestly. So I'll just answer Kris's. I haven't fled a conflict, right? I'm doing these investigations from a very comfortable, like, pretty much my kitchen table in London is where I do a lot of these investigations, right? But I think for me, it is an issue, this constant exposure, especially when, you know, you're there and you're wearing, let's say, like headphones so you can listen to the audio and so on. It can become very stressful. And it can almost feel like you're in danger, and it makes, you know, life after work difficult. But when we do this work, we, you know, practice techniques, right, to reduce our exposure to extremely traumatic content, right? Because when we can't do, like, for me to work on a database of attacks against medical facilities or a database of chemical weapons attacks in Syria, like I can't choose to reflect on each and every attack and its impact on the victims and, you know, fatalities and so on. So I choose, you know, to kind of look at the video for what it is and look at the video solely for what I need it for, right? So that could be the type of munition that is being used. That could be, you know, the building that the video is taking place in. I think that's what a lot of open source investigators also do as well, to make their work, you know, a little bit easier and a little less traumatic. And also for me, like, a huge part about why I love this job is, like, I get to come to things like this and talk to you guys and, like, just hang out. Like, that's my favorite part. And just hear your experiences and be able to share, like, you know, something that I know that might help you, something that you know that might help me. And that helps me a lot as well. Yeah.
Great, thank you very much. So, yeah, of course, please.
I'm certainly not an old school person, but I can tell you sincerely that I'm very careful and even scared sometimes with open source information. In my country, where there is no war, there are political problems of many sorts, but there is no war. YouTube, Facebook, and all social networks have become extremely dangerous for the country. It is destabilizing, it is disinforming the populations, and sometimes it's even igniting or initiating protests which have no reason whatsoever. Now, when I compare that with what I have seen personally in Syria, particularly taking into consideration the Syrian war or conflict or protests, were not really innocent from the external interventions or interferences. Let's call a spade a spade. It is not 100% a spontaneous popular uprising, like what we have seen in Syria, in Tunis, in Cairo, in Yemen, in Jordan, in Algeria. What else? And certainly in Syria. There are many international players behind the scene who are trying to put oil on the fire. The situation in Sudan is different. The situation in Sudan, this is a decision taken by two military leaders to fight just for power. So I would give more credibility on open source information coming from inside Sudan than to rely on whatever we see on Facebook and others regarding the Syrian case or the Tunisian case or the Egyptian case. Therefore, in my view, open source information has to be verified. We have to make sure that it comes from a reliable source, from a credible person, because there are fake names in Facebook. There are fake news, misinformation all over. At some stage, I was in Homs in Syria. And the very same, I would say, within the 2 hours, there was a long tirade in Facebook about the place where we were. The city was divided between the revolutionaries and the authorities of the Red Crescent, etc. That the place was bombed with tens of people injured, killed, etc. Whereas it was not true. We spent the whole afternoon in that very same location. And that is a way to create more instability within the community, to push people to do things which they would not have done without this kind of fake news. So verification, in my view, is essential. وشكرا جزيلا.
Thank you very much, Radwan. And I will close by saying that for those of you who are attending the workshop tomorrow, the questions of verification and the questions on how to deal with misinformation and disinformation will absolutely be at the core of the discussions. So thank you all. Thank you to the panelists. Thank you for the questions. Thank you for your patience. And thank you, Bettina.
Thank you very much. And I would like to close the day in just repeating like 6 quotes or so, which I, took note of, and I just thought they were good quotes of the day. Starting with Radwan this morning, where also he described, after so many years of working in this field, that what is happening in Sudan right now goes beyond what he has seen in many other conflicts of atrocities. And I thought that was a strong statement. Also that, he said, we need justice. This is not politics, it is humanity. Then we heard Betty, where she said, we want to celebrate the International Justice Day, but in fact, there's nothing like justice to celebrate in Darfur. I thought that was also like a good statement, that it is very important to strengthen national justice systems, and the ICC will not solve all our problems. So rather, let's think about what we can do, what national states can do, and what potentially universal jurisdiction can do. We had Abdullahi from Amnesty International talking about or identifying roughly the crimes they may have identified, from deliberate attacks on civilians, people caught in crossfire, looting and destruction, and collocation of RSF, people in heavily populated areas. We also heard from Khaloud. She was saying that for her, the international attention span is very limited, and war was brought because of impunity. Sudan has not seen any justice in the last many years, and that for her it was not just ending the war, but ending the war on the civilian population, on civism, as she said. And all this, if we don't include accountability and justice, there will not be a real peace. We also discussed the Security Council issue and explained what the recent speech of the prosecutor has to say. Big news. He said that even what's happening today in Sudan could potentially is covered by the mandate, the Security Council mandate. We heard a lot of legal explanations by Philip. We discussed, I think for me was quite interesting to discuss the issue of genocide and a few signs which you could identify as genocide needs the intention. So the question about is there the intention to destroy the Masalit? We talked a lot about it. Where then you have to look, were they targeted as by virtue of the membership of the group? or were they targeted because they were occupying the land? I found that interesting, and it sharpens a bit, I think, our analysis of what is an international crime. Then we ended our last session on open source, where I think a lot of interesting quotes were made. What is an investigation? You know, that's you talk about an investigation where there's no access, where access to the space is impossible, and where you try to help filling the gaps in information. So not claiming that open source information will substitute judicial investigations, but that OSINT is one piece of the puzzle to prove a crime. And interesting to hear Sudan archives right now, the largest existing memory of crimes since 2019, although I also want to acknowledge the other initiatives which are there to collect crimes. And at the end, the self-care and importance that we all should think about. How do we deal with all this? What we are seeing is very important for all of us, for sure, much more for our Sudanese colleagues than for us coming from Europe. And I just want to stress that I think this is very important, and every office and every organization working in this field should think about it. Anyway, so for me it was super interesting. Let me end by also thanking the Wayamo team. We are not really complete. Yes, please. Sama from Sudan, who joined us recently in Berlin, also after a very long evacuation from Sudan. So we have her with us in Berlin. It's very, very nice to have a Sudanese in our office now. We have Judy here, who is our representative in Kenya. Thank you so much. I know it was not easy all the time. We have Linda, who moderated the panel, originally from Kenya, who's also in our Berlin office. We have Michael, you heard him. He left the ICC to work for Wayamo. I hope you heard that. And
my section.
And yes, exactly. And we have Kris, who's also in our Berlin office doing journalism, technical stuff, open source information. Whereas Tony is also around, there he is. So he does a lot of the contextual analysis we live from and we get information from. So thank you all. Did I mention everybody? Where's Guja and Basit? Yes, you heard from them today. There's Basit. So thank you so much, Wayamo team and the audience for being here. We see the majority of the people for the workshop tomorrow. And let's have a coffee and then close the day. Thank you very much.